on the chat bus. Last week, we had an incredible conversation with Nnena Weke and Zibati Ogodo about employers' mindsets. Together, we learned that better homes begin with better employers. Leadership starts with us. Domestic workers deserve dignity, structure, and clarity. Thank you to everyone who continued the conversation in the domestic employer circle throughout the week. Tonight, we'll be taking the next step. Our conversation is one many employers don't have until something has already gone wrong. We are talking about values-based hiring and sex-proofing your home. How do you hire intentionally? How do you protect your children? How do you create healthy boundaries? How do you safeguard everyone in your household? We are looking forward to another practical and honest conversation. So stay tight with us. Housekeeping. Just a few reminders before we begin. Kindly keep your microphone muted throughout the presentations. Feel free to post questions in the chat as they come to you. We will have time for questions at the end. This session is being recorded. We encourage you to stay until the very end because we will preview next week's conversation. To officially welcome us into tonight's session and begin the conversation, I would like to invite the founder and executive director of Educate the Citizens International Organization, who is also our first speaker for tonight, Chiagozim Adindu. Chiagozim Adindu is the founder and executive director of Educate the Citizens International Organization, a non-profit organization dedicated to equipping individuals, families, and organizations with the social skills, characters, and leadership competencies needed to build stronger homes, workplaces, and communities. An attorney, educator, and non-profit leader, Chiagozim is passionate about helping people navigate everyday relationships with greater intentionality, dignity, and excellence. Through her work, she designs practical learning experiences that bridges the gap between knowledge and everyday living, with a particular focus on family life, workplace readiness, leadership, and domestic employer education. She currently serves as a program supervisor in Oregon, USA, where she leads teams delivering housing stability and social support services while championing operational excellence, workforce development, and people-centered leadership. Over the years, Chiagozim has trained students, professionals, employers, domestic workers, faith communities, and organizations in social skills, etiquette, leadership, communication, and values-based living. She is the convener of the Modern Domestic Employer Series, an initiative designed to help employers build healthier relationships, stronger household systems, and more peaceful homes. She holds a degree in law, including a Master of Law from the University of Oregon School of Law, and is completing a second master's in nonprofit management at the University of Oregon. She lives in Oregon, USA, with her husband, Engineer Frank Adindu, and their 3 boys. Please join me in welcoming Chiagozim Adindu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nkemjika, and good evening to everybody joining us. When she started, she asked us to put in the comment section, just basically share where you're joining in from. Thank you so much. Thank you. Can you just share in the comment section where you're joining in from, so your name and where you're joining in from? Thank you so much. Awesome, awesome, awesome. As people keep joining in, we're just going to start. As Miss Nkem said, this session is being recorded, and I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, Auntie Aki, thank you so much for joining. Auntie Aki is joining in from Maryland, USA. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ma. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen fine? Can anybody see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for taking the time to join. I can see our chats are coming in already. Amazing. Oh gosh, I'm having a system. I'm trying to reconnect my phone. Give me 1 minute here. Before we start, I just want to really appreciate everyone for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be here today. Um, it's such a privilege to have you back for week 2 of the Modern Domestic Employer series. I want you to just join in with your favorite emoji while I'm trying to set up. Joining in from Nigeria. Thank you so much, Linda. Comments are still coming in. Amazing. Awesome. Give me 1 minute trying to ensure that I'm able to walk through my screens without so much of a disruption. Thank you so much for your chats. I'm seeing them coming in. Amazing. Thank you. Okay. So let me know when you can see my screen. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you so much for taking the time again to be here today. It's an absolute privilege to have you join us for week 2. We were going through week 1's messages recently and just talking about some of the questions that had been asked in week 1, and it was amazing to have the speakers that we had basically get this conversation running or started. Week 1 was definitely amazing, and for me, I feel like I have had to just sit with a lot of the wisdom that was shared with us um last week, and I feel like I'm going to be building my session today from last week's conversation. If you were here last week, just send some love to the speakers because they're also joining us today. You can pump those hearts, send your love emojis, send your clapping emojis. It was such an amazing session. But if you're just joining for the first time today, welcome. I don't think you've missed so much. We have our sessions recorded on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to go back and just binge on that. After today's session, we will make the first session to be a paid session only. In other words, we would remove the access to the public view and people will have to pay for it. So you still have till the end of today to try and catch up on week 1 if it's something you're considering. But week 2 is going to be very much building on that, on everything that we discussed in week 2. Today is going to be talking about a lot of the things we discussed in one. And I'm really excited about this topic because it's something that is dear to my heart, and it's a conversation and a topic we don't talk about enough. And I want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to be here, because there are a million and one other ways you could have been spending your evening. But if you're here today, it tells me something about you. It tells me that you are very intentional about wanting to change. You're very intentional about seeking knowledge. You feel like there is more. You feel like there is something that you're doing that could be tweaked in a different way to give you maximum satisfaction. And for me, that also tells me that you value yourself. You're taking time. Time is money. Time is all that we have on this side of eternity, right? So you're taking time out of everything that you could have been doing to build yourself. And it shows me that you're worthy, and I completely agree with it. And so, again, thank you for being here. But before I start today's conversation, I want to let you know that my conversations are usually very engaging. Like, I want people to engage. Please feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions at the end of my session to ask questions. In the meantime, a lot of the questions I'll be asking, feel free to use the chat box to type in your answers. But I like very engaging sessions. I like for us to just have that time when you're giving feedback on the go. So midway into my session, I'm going to be asking some pointed questions, and I'm happy to read some of your chats as much as I can see them. But what I'm going to be doing is, before I start, I want to be very upfront with you. I think it's only fair that I tell you something about myself that was not captured in that bio. And by the way, all of that has been written. Glory to God, because some days people read your bios and you're like, okay, is that really me? But more importantly, um, I don't want you thinking that I'm doing what I am doing today because I have figured out domestic work, the culture in our environment, or because I am the most perfect person to be doing it. Quite the contrary. As a matter of fact, I feel like every time I have been asked to do this, have these conversations, I kind of cringe a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Um, I haven't always gotten it right. I've made a ton of mistakes, like a lot of us today, attending this. So I haven't figured it out. I'm not perfect. I still wrestle with a lot of the feelings I feel. Some days I'm like, I don't know why I should be the one sharing this conversation, because I am as flawed as everybody sitting here, right? And there's this scripture, I think it's First Timothy 1 verse 15. Paul was writing and he said, "Oh, Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners, of whom I'm the chief of all sinners." And every time I read those words, I am honestly reminded that God commits some of his best works into broken people. And I'm just saying all of that to say that I am not one who has figured it out, who is perfect. Absolutely not. Right? Like many Nigerian employers, I had no formal training. Nobody taught me how to be a domestic employer. Nobody sat me down to explain how to recruit domestic employers, or how to onboard them, or how to communicate my expectations, or how to even supervise another adult. These are things that a lot of us did not have training on. I don't think there was a school we all missed. There just wasn't that opportunity to be trained. And so, like everybody, I simply followed advice. I followed what I heard or what I saw, what was modeled before me. Sometimes it worked, but half the time, the reason why we're having this conversation is because many times those models, those things that were sent, those things that were told us, those models that we saw growing up, a lot of times it didn't work. And so looking back now, I realized something very important. I wasn't trying really hard to be a bad person. I wasn't trying to be a an untrained employer. I just did not have that training. And that's the difference. And I suspect that many of us today are in that same category. You're not intentionally trying to create an unhealthy home. We simply just, like I said earlier on, inherited unhealthy systems that we've never really stopped to question. A lot of us have not stopped to say, why is this happening? And if you remembered our speaker, Ms. Nenna Wike, when she talked about it, she said that, by the way, that's my sister, my elder sister. She said that there are times when she will see, my mom bringing helps into our home, and she'll be like, why is this girl in our house? Very few people stop to ask that question. Is she not missing home? Right? How does she feel being so far away from home? most times we're not stopping to reflect on those things. And there are no right or wrong answers. But I'm just saying that the regular domestic employer in Nigeria is like, I need a house help. We get one. I'm happy. So I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to our conversation next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about the mental health of the domestic employer and the domestic workers, and how, as Nigerians, especially because mental health is not something we talk about enough. I'm so excited because it plays, once that session is over, a lot of things will be clear. The trauma we're exposed to, the things we go through and we do not process, right? Someone sent me, of course, not the first time, but someone sent me recently a video of a woman trying to use a knife on her. I don't know how many of us have seen that on Facebook, on her domestic worker. An atrocity, like something that is just plain. Yeah, I don't know what words are sufficient enough to capture that. But another, when I was sharing it with somebody else, someone asked me a question that stopped me right in my tracks. The person said, I wonder what trauma this madam has gone through. And I was like, that's so valid. It's not something we stop a lot to talk about, the trauma of the employer. And it's not an excuse. We're not excusing some of the behaviors we're seeing. It's just giving us context. It's giving us information, right? But she said, I wonder what trauma this lady has gone through that is making it feel okay to do this to this girl. Because you know what they say, traumatized people traumatize other people. Hurting people hurt people. It's a circle, it's a vicious circle. And very few people pause to question things as they are. Um, so like I said, we simply inherited unhealthy systems that we never stopped to question. And unfortunately, as good intentioned as we are, or as many good intentions as we may have, good intention alone is not enough. It's not enough to just say, I really want to. I would really love for the people who come to my house to feel XYZ. That intention is, I mean, I feel like it's great. If it were to be measured, if we're measuring progress to perfection, it's maybe 10 or 20%. So you're making progress, but good intention alone is not enough. So I'm going to be sharing a lot from my personal story because I just feel like for conversations like this, it only makes sense for us to keep things super relatable. So I got married in 2016 and we had our first child 2 years after that. And that's how my house help journey basically began. I had very good ones at first, really amazing people, and we're trying to just figure it out. Right? It's funny, and I want you to think about the first time you had a domestic worker. Like, what templates were you working with? How did you even know what to say, what to do? Was it something you saw from your parents, or was it your neighbor? Like, how do you even navigate those kinds of relationships? Can we have those conversations? When you bring that person into your house, how do you show them what to do? Who teaches you how to, onboard, how to model, how to train? What's the tone? So these are things I had to start figuring out with my first domestic worker, and she was an amazing, amazing person. But the thing is that I had good ones at the beginning, like I said earlier on, and somehow they always left in December. Sometimes they will promise you they're coming back. Do we know what I mean? I call that the December exodus. Somehow, the people that made their way to you always make their way back to where they're coming from in December. Promise that they'll come back. I'm interested in knowing how many percentage of them ever make it back to the same household. But something happens every time these people go for Christmas. I don't know what happens on the other side. And maybe we should have these conversations where we interview them and we ask, like, really, why didn't you come back? But I'm just curious. But that became like my pattern. I would just have these people come. I would think we're having a good time, but somehow we will start again the next year looking for the next domestic worker. I'm going to pause here and just ask, where do you source your domestic help from? I want you to reply in the comment section. Where, like, what has been your pattern? Do you source from family and friends? Are they like village collection, recommendations from somebody in the village? Oh, there's this girl. Or do you use strictly agencies? Do you use where do you source your domestic workers from? I'm genuinely interested. I'm just going to let you put in your comments in the comment section and I'll continue, but I really want to know where those things come from, like from you, from your end. And who knows, some of us might just learn one or two things. Thank you so much. Plangred said I've sourced from family and also referrals from friends. Amazing. Thank you. Okay. So I'm just going to continue, right? Um, However, like as your comments are coming in, usually once or twice I tried um agencies. A lot of them came from recommendations from family and friends. We had a lot come from village connection. My mom would say, "Oh, there is this auntie of ours. She said her daughter," and then they come to our houses. So at first, like everyone, I started to get really frustrated with the turnover, like just consistently changing them. Somehow, those things affect us. And we don't even really stop to think about how stopping, if you're a working mom, you have to like take time every time to take them for their medical test, to train them. It does affect us. And so, like every other person, after a while, I started getting really frustrated, you know like one of the speakers from week one said, we call them a necessary evil. Oh gosh, I joined. So the point is, I joined the bandwagon of people who called them, oh, they're just a necessary evil. At the time, I had a baby. I was trying really hard to build my business. So it's like, yeah, I really needed someone to help me in the home front while I built my business and grew in my career. Um, yeah, like every other person, I made mistakes, right? Sometimes I was the one who blurred our relationship, who went beyond the scope of that relationship and invited them to become family members before they even knew what that meant. Do you know what I mean? I mean that you have such a good intention and you're telling yourself, oh, this person is like a family member to me. And then somehow you start to blur those lines really fast. You start to invite them into conversations that they are not necessarily ready for. So sometimes it took me a while to realize that those were some of the things that were affecting my relationship with my domestic workers. Of course, I'm not saying they have their issues, like we know they have their issues, right? So they come with their issues, but I also at some point I started to reflect on what I was doing right or wrong, and especially what I could have done differently. And one of the things I would pause here and say is your domestic worker is not your family member. It doesn't mean you should treat them poorly. It just means that the same way, the essence of this conversation we're having throughout July is also to reorient us. I'm hoping that domestic employers start to understand that this thing is an employee-employer relationship first. The same way you are with your boss in the office is how you should be with your employee at home. The relationship between the domestic worker and the domestic employer is such a sensitive one because your home is your office, but it's also your home. And so things can get really blurry really fast, right? So it's more than even the employer-employee relationship in the office. This one needs a lot of attention, and most times we don't pay a lot of attention to this relationship. But the first things I want to tell you is that they are not your family members. This is something I had to learn very hard. It also means that because they're not your family members, there are certain things you cannot do. You cannot hit, you cannot seize their phone, you cannot, no. We'll still talk about age. I'm going to talk about it because that age conversation came up during week one. It's when we start to employ within certain age ranges, it's even difficult to be an employer. You start to become mommy before you're even an employer. You start to become ma before you're even an employer, right? It changes the dynamics when you employ people that are very young. You really want to teach them reach you're expected to deal with them maturely, but because of the age difference and because of the power dynamics in the current domestic work culture in Nigeria, it becomes even more difficult. And that's why I said good intentions are not enough. We have to have these conversations. We have to agree. We have to reflect enough to agree that there are certain things we have to do differently. So all of that is happening. We're all making mistakes. My domestic worker is making her mistake. I'm making my own mistake as an employee. Just basically playing it by the ear. But something happened in 2021 for me that changed the story, right? Um, at by 2021, I was just at the verge of letting go another one. She had come into my house the year before. I will share this in another session about how my experience with that particular um, staff that lived with me birthed this whole program. It was that experience that God used basically to open my eyes to understand that we are doing this thing wrong. And if there is, it's, you know how they say that it's only a mad person that keeps doing the same thing and expects a different result. I will talk about that. That's a whole conversation. We'll probably have it in the DEC circle. DEC is the Domestic Employer Circle on WhatsApp. If you've not joined, I want to encourage you to join. We would leave the link to that in the comments section once we're done with our session for today. But all of that was happening, and this girl God had told me I was sending you one more person. By 2021, I had had maybe 10. I don't know, I was changing them. Once you stress me, I'm just like, girl, bye. I'll see you later in life. Yeah, bye. So I was at the verge of doing that, and then the Holy Spirit kept telling me, hold on, hold on, right? Like this one, you have to grow with her. There is a becoming that needs to happen, but you have to be a part of it. It's not her problem alone. There are certain things you have to start to change, you have to become. And then when you become, she will ride on your becoming. So I was just in that phase of just struggling with some of the things I was seeing with my staff at the time and trying to make a decision whether or not I wanted to. And I got this call. Someone called me and told me that my childhood friend had killed her 11-year-old domestic worker. I was shocked. I won't even lie, like I was shocked. She had been arrested for killing her 11-year-old domestic worker. And even today, if I'm being honest, I feel like those words still feel very difficult for me to say out loud. Because we're childhood friends, I had not seen her in a while, but I knew her, right? She was educated, she was articulate, she was the kind of person whose personality would never have suggested such brutality. So I was a bit confused. Like many Nigerians, I was shocked. And of course, social media was buzzing. The news spread around Nigeria really quickly, and everyone had an opinion. Everyone, of course, condemned her actions. They called her wicked. They called her evil. People called for justice, and rightfully so. But you see, while everybody was doing that and talking, I found myself crying. Like I cried so hard, and I'll tell you why. I cried for the little girl who never had a chance to tell her own side of the story. Incidentally, I also cried for my friend whose life had changed forever. I would later discover that she even had a baby. At the time, she was pregnant and she had a baby in prison. But I also cried for myself. Not because I had done what she did, of course, but because for the first time in my life, I saw how dangerously close many of us unknowingly live to becoming the kind of employer we never imagined we could become. Dangerously close. And that realization really, really unsettled me. So I began asking myself a lot of questions. Was the difference between my friend and me really as wide as I wanted to believe? Was I really different from her? Was the difference simply because she crossed a line that many of us are constantly approaching without realizing it? So instead of asking yourself questions like, how can she be so wicked? For me, when I say things like this, I'm asking myself, how close to this am I? What's the difference between this person and me? Because sometimes, in a bid to be very self-righteous, we forget that there is not much difference between these people and us. We may not beat our domestic workers to death, but somehow, I want to ask us, how often do we humiliate them? How often do we shout? How often do we dismiss their humanity like they don't matter? How often do we employ children because everyone else is doing it? How often do we normalize practices simply because they've become part of our culture? When I was putting together this program, somebody said, oh, is this a diasporan conversation? Are we having people from abroad? And I said, no, not necessarily. I want us to have a Nigerian conversation first. This will eventually grow to become whatever it is God has in mind, because I feel like this is definitely a God movement. But can we talk about our culture in Nigeria? One domestic employer at a time. How often do we do things simply because they have become part of our culture and we have not stopped to question them? So I'm going to ask another question and I'm curious to know your answers in the comment section. What age is too small for domestic work? What age of children should never be caught doing house help work? And I'm not, this is not to shame anybody or to, there are no right or wrong answers. I'm just genuinely wanting to know what we think. When is it too young? When are you like, this child or this person has no business doing what they're doing? I'm curious. I really want to see your responses. Thank you so much for your responses as they come in. But as I started to ask these questions, I came to an uncomfortable conclusion. Sometimes the only difference between an employer who makes the headline for battering their employee is and someone who doesn't. So the difference between someone who makes it to the news for doing something wrong and someone who doesn't. Maybe it's just circumstance. And maybe it's because someone has not yet, reported you or reported what happened. And every time I think about that, I'm terrified because it means that I can no longer comfort myself with the idea that only wicked people create unhealthy homes. Only good people too can create very unhealthy homes. Loving people can make very harmful decisions. Christians can do it. Religious people can do it. Educated people can do it. Professional people, people like you and me, we can do it. So I want you to start to reflect more on yourself than even castigate. I remember the story of Jesus and the lady who was found committing adultery, right? And he looked at them and he said, "Let he who is without sin be the first to cast the stone." Are you a thin line away from making the headlines, or have you figured it out? If you figured it out, I'm amazed. I'm happy for you. But if you're like me and we're still trying to understand this thing, then I'm hoping that you're reflecting and that we can make the changes together. Another thing that experience with my friend and just the questions that I started to ask did for me was I realized that we are only, and this is what I wrote here, we're only one bad day away from becoming a version of ourselves that we never thought existed. You're one untreated trauma, one season of burnout, one financial pressure, one difficult child, one unresolved marital conflict, one hormonal balance, one wrong piece of advice, one moment of uncontrolled anger away from doing that, which you thought you would never do. I need us to remember that human beings are far more fragile than we like to admit. And that's why we cannot build our homes on emotions or assumptions or just good intentions alone. We need principles, we need systems. We need us to be more intentional. We need wisdom. And I'm hoping that the conversation today will start to welcome you into that space where we're having these conversations, where we're thinking, what principles do I need to learn? What things do I need to unlearn? Right? Um, I want us to think, what kind of employer, this was also a question we asked on day one. What kind of employer do I want to be? Yes, these domestic workers have a ton of problems. I know. We're not excusing it. We would also have that conversation. As a matter of fact, ETSA, your Educated Citizens International Organization, is doing something about it. We have a training session for domestic workers where they come and with these conversations from their perspective. But I want you to ask yourself, what kind of employer do I want to become? Because I realized that before God ever holds a domestic employee or a worker accountable for the work they do in my house, he will first hold me accountable for the environment I created, the leadership I provided, and the values I modeled. And that realization for me changed everything. So tonight, I want us to continue that journey. What was the journey conversation we started in week one? I want us to continue together. But I don't want us to look at it as experts, right? Looking down on each other or other people. I want us to remember that we're not perfect domestic workers. And there are no perfect domestic workers, and at the same time, there are no perfect domestic employers. But I want us to be ordinary people who are willing to examine ourselves first, because I realize that the quality of our homes is always matching the quality of our leadership. And that basically brings us now to the conversation we're supposed to have today. Values-based hiring. Values-based hiring. And I want you to ask yourself, like, when you say here values-based hiring, what comes to your mind? Before we decide who belongs in our home, we must first answer a question that is difficult for us to answer most times. Who are you? Who are you? Genuinely, who are you? And this is the basis of our conversation today. Who are you? I'm not asking you what do you do for a living. I'm saying at your core, at your very essence, who are you? And this is a question I had to ask myself and answer many times. And I said many times because it's one question that you think you've answered, and then you realize that there are different layers of you, of how you show up. And there are different things that are basically influencing how you show up on a daily basis. And the more I reflected on that question, I realized that looking back now, it seems very obvious, but before you hire a domestic worker, most of us have already spent years being hired by ourselves. So we go for interviews, or you've been in an interview panel like myself. I've done a lot of interviews. But somehow when it comes to employer-employee relationship, we just forget all the things we saw or we've experienced. I'll give an example.
Are you disabled? Okay. You know that's for wheelchair users. Are
Please
you
let's
using a
remember
wheelchair?
to mute ourselves. Hi, thank you so much,
They
Jules,
are
for
not
joining.
disabled, Tito. I thought you studied psychology. Oh, Tim, sorry, oh. They are differently able. Okay. Oh. Okay. They're able. Able still is exactly able. But they are just differently able.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we just muted Jules. Sorry about that. I've had the opportunity. I was just talking about the fact that sometimes we go for interviews, we do all of these things, but we do not apply some of the principles that we see in those interviews in our interviewing process and hiring process with domestic workers. Somehow we understand, or maybe we don't. Maybe we don't even understand or realize that this is a very serious relationship and we should actually pay attention to it. But it's also funny to see how when you think of employer-employee relationship, we see a lot of effort that goes into recruiting us. If you've ever worked for somebody, you've seen how stressful it was for you to go for an interview and do all the things you had to do. But somehow we do not apply those principles again into the relationship between our employee, when we're trying to recruit our employees. So I'm going to share a few of the things I have learned from recruiting and just being on different recruitment panels. I have watched exceptional people in my, over almost 10 years now. I've been on different recruitment journeys. I've seen space cases where not domestic employers, rather, people coming for an interview, I know they're qualified, but they don't necessarily get the job. I've also seen people who have very scanty CVs get away with jobs. And for every interview, whether consciously or unconsciously, I'll tell you something that the hiring manager is looking for. The first question, of course, every interview process is asking is, can this person do the job? Right? So there is a question of competence. Can this person do the job? Of course, like always, you want to make sure that whoever gets the role has the technical know-how, is how other people have also said it, technical know-how. Amazing. But that's not it. And that's the mistake we often make. We often assume that when we go for jobs, we're trying really hard to ensure that we're showing them that we can do the job. But that's not always where people are. That's not always the focus. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and share it again. Can you still see my screen though?
Yes, but it has two bullets.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing it. Awesome. Okay, is it better now?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So they're basically saying, is this person competent? That's the first question we're asking. The other thing, and basically what that is asking is, do they have the skills, the knowledge, the ability required for this role? So for a domestic employer, you're asking, can you cook? You sabi clean? You sabi bath baby, right? Um, can they care for children? Competency matters. But you see, the problem with our recruitment process is that most times we ask this and we stop. So the person comes in and you realize that sometimes your biggest issue is not even that you say they can cook, they can, but you start to have other different problems. It's no longer about their competency sometimes, even though we get into those conversations and we realize they couldn't do any of the things they promised that they could do. So that's even one conversation. But there's also the conversation where they come into that relationship and they are doing what they're supposed to do. But if you notice, the problems you start to see or the things you're complaining about are totally different. You're saying this person lies a lot. She doesn't take initiative. She's just very lazy. She's just always complaining. She doesn't have a good attitude. She's always frowning. And I'm using she, and I know it's very gender biased. It can also be a he. It's just that based on the statistics I shared with us on week one, a lot of the people who do this domestic work are mostly women and girls. So forgive me if I keep doing those things, but you get the drift. And so you notice that sometimes the things you start to complain about are not necessarily competence issues. So I'm going to tell you the second thing your hiring manager, and this is just free information, but also as an aside, we do a lot of this conversation for people transitioning from classroom to career. In our organization in EdSciO, we do a lot of interview preparation because we're really big on social skills. So for free, I'm going to tell you something else that your hiring manager is looking at. Beyond your competence, they're looking at your character, your personality, right? So the hiring manager mostly is the person who will supervise you, is the person you will work with. And that's why, apart from HR being in that conversation, you will notice that if you've gone for interviews a lot, you're with a panel, and on that panel is the person who will work with you directly. And that person is also checking to see, can I trust this person's character? Are they honest? Are they teachable? Can they receive correction without being defensive? Are they responsible? Do they keep their words? Just all of that happening at the same time. The problem with this is that we're not checking certificate anymore because there is no certificate for integrity. You can't get a diploma in humility, like there's nothing to show. So there are no professional qualifications for even emotional maturity. Yeah, these are often the qualities that determine whether an employment relationship survives beyond the first few months. It even determines sometimes whether you make it into the role itself. And the last thing that they're asking or they're checking is, does this person fit into the culture we're creating in this organization? Oftentimes people don't know. You come out of an interview, you're like, it went really well. I don't know why they didn't call me. Sometimes it's not even that you're a bad person. They just, you're just not a good fit. And that's okay. And I'll give an example of why that is. If you come up, for instance, if you have an organizational structure or culture that emphasizes flat hierarchy. So in that organization, nobody's really above anybody. They just like to keep things leveled out. Everybody's everybody's friend. We're just respecting each other. And you're coming and during the interview, you're giving the vibe of someone who is very strict, someone who believes that everybody should be respecting themselves according to their position. You're competent, you have the character, you're just not a good fit for the culture, right? That's exactly the same thing the same conversations you should be having with your domestic employer, as in your domestic employment work. Does this person have the character? Are they competent? But will they fit into the culture of our home? So the next question I want to ask us now is how many of us even understand the culture of our home? What's the culture of your home? If we come in and we're saying, what are you trying to build? What is the aura? What's the ambience? Culture is not what you explain. Culture is what people see. It's how you're defined behind closed doors. Someone can go and just be like, oh, in that house, everywhere is just always peaceful. You didn't have to say it. It's just obvious. So your culture usually are a reflection of your values. Your values are things that are important to you, the things that guide your actions, whether or not you're under pressure, whether you have money or not, they're just central to how you show up on a daily basis. I like to think of values as your follow come personality, right? What are your values? And then what is your culture in your house? If you answer some of these questions, and that's why we're talking about values-based hiring, you realize that a lot of the people that have passed through your house had no business passing through your house. As a matter of fact, there are certain times when people have defined culture and you realize you actually do not need a domestic worker. You're reflecting enough on that conversation helps you understand you do not need a domestic worker. Or maybe you just realized there are certain people I need. I just use this slide to explain. Can they do the job? Who are they when no one is watching? That's character. Culture, will they fit into your family? Will they fit into your values? Will they fit into your communication style? For the caliber of plans you have, for the kinds of plans you have for your children, for your spouse, for your home, this person coming in, will they be a good fit? And at this, for me, I just also wanted to reiterate that culture begins with you. Culture begins with you. I feel like having done all of these things, when I went through this process, something that changed for me, I stopped asking, where can I get a good domestic worker? Where can I get the best house help? I started asking questions like, what kind of person will flourish in our home? What kind of person would, what kind of home, first of all, home culture am I building? And that basically brings us, as I'm rounding up, that brings us to the conversation around personal values. What are your personal values? You say this personal value thing. I feel like in your, I mean, this is something I say to young people when I'm having those conversations. One of the things you have to do for yourself before you go too far in life is find out your personal values, understand yourself, and understand why you do certain things. If you do it from a very early age, it will affect the kinds of friends you have. It will affect the kind of person you marry. It will affect the kind of spaces you find yourself in. See, your personal values will affect the church you worship. It will affect a lot of things. You'll just realize that once you understand your personal values and you're aligned with your personal values, you have less trauma, less stigma, less drama. You're just finding your place, your place and your space where you belong. It's just easy. Someone like me, for instance, I hate injustice. If you're oppressive, you can't be my friend. If you're a wicked person, you can't be my friend. Like I've tried it. I've tried really hard to fit into certain spaces. It just won't work. I am very vocal about things I feel should not be. Maybe that's why I'm a lawyer. Maybe. I don't know. I just really hate oppression, injustice, or fairness. One of the worst things anybody can say about me is that, oh, you're partial. I'll be like, oh my goodness. I like things to just be plain, easy, equal for everybody. I hate that, things, favoritism or favoring one person over another. And so it's easy for me to get into certain spaces and just feel like, oh, I'm at home. I like this person because our values are aligned. Same thing with marriage, same thing with my friends, same thing with the jobs I do. There are certain places I would never work, no matter how much they're paying me. What are your personal values? Your values are like a compass. They direct you in the way you should go, and they literally direct you even with your domestic employers. So I gave an example of some of the things that are important to us in our family. We're a faith family. Like you discuss with me one, two, three times. Even when I don't intend it, it just leaks. You just hear something like, oh yeah, the Holy Spirit told it to just come out. Like I mentioned also, we hate injustice. In my family, something that is very big for us is honesty. I tell all my employer and all my staff, break all you want, spoil all you want. If I ask you like this, just tell me. don't lie to me. It's a big deal in our family. Fairness, we're very big on education. Another way you identify your values is where your money goes to. Where your if you had 10 naira and you had this and you had this, where will you effortlessly, make a decision? Where would that 10 naira effortlessly go to? Someone said something in week one. She said that one of the reasons she had to let go of her employer or of her domestic worker was because the lady girl was refusing to go to school. At that time, I'm sure she didn't have the word for it, but what was happening was there was a misalignment between her value and her family values, her values and her family's values vis-a-vis the girl's values. The girl is like, I don't want to go to school. My friend is like, you have to go to school. Like, it's super important to us. These conversations should be had way before you even hire somebody. You should sit down and say, these are my non-negotiables. These are the things I'm not willing to compromise on. Then you can now start your recruitment process. So I'm saying all of this to say that sometimes, and I want you to also tell me if this is true. Have you reflected back on your hiring journey and realized that this person was not necessarily a good or bad person? They just did not fit our family. Because before this realization, before I started having these conversations, excuse me, I would usually categorize domestic workers or employees generally across board as good or bad. But now I'm realizing that some people are not necessarily good or bad. They are just not a good fit. And I'm just going to end with another story because I'm full of stories. When my first child started going to crèche, he started going to crèche at 1 year and 6 months or so, 1 year and 4 months. One day he came back and while I was playing with him, he rolled a piece of paper and he hit me. He could barely say too many words at the time. And he rolled the paper and he hit me and he says, eat your food. Eat your food. I beat you now. So I laughed, but that thing stayed with me. And he did it again. And like every time I go and pick him from crèche and we're home, he would always roll and spank me and say, eat your food. So I started investigating and I will not bore you with the long story, but long story made short. I realized that my son was being beaten by one of the nannies in the daycare. Long story made short again, I would also discover that there had been a lot of complaints about this lady, and so the owner of the school, the lady that owned the school, said she was going to let her go. But I'm very curious. Like if you know me, I'm somebody who really wants to understand how people think and why. So out of curiosity, I remember just reaching out to the lady and saying, I just want to know, like, why? Why were you beating him? Like, what really was going on? And she said, Ma, I was just tired. Your son doesn't eat very well. And as she's saying this thing, she was crying, she was apologizing, but she was like, and my son was true, my son was a picky eater when he was a child. He said he wouldn't eat. I have other children to feed. He was taking too much time, and I still had so many things to do. I just wanted to scare him to see if he would finish quickly. It wasn't the kind of response I expected. There was no malice in her explanation. It was just frustration, pressure, fatigue. It was somebody who was going through so much that led to poor judgment. Um, I feel also there was also a lack of understanding of child development. But what struck me was that she wasn't a wicked person. From my encounter with her, I don't think I would say she was a wicked person. She was just basically like when we spoke, I noticed she was someone who was completely overwhelmed by a role that demanded more patience, more emotional regulation, more empathy than she had possessed at that stage. And I feel like that particular encounter with that lady taught me a lot. Taught me a lot. Oftentimes, we're too quick to label people good or bad, but that lady will probably do better in an accounting organization, in a space where she's not doing children, where she's just doing less human contact, having less human contact. Even for me, currently in my current church, I help in the children's department. There are times when they come and they're like, oh, we need people to help with the littles. I'm like, I don't want to do littles. I have babies in my house. I'm always cleaning diaper. Take me to 9 year olds. That's where I thrive. I just want to be having sincere conversations with children I want to be engaged. If you put me in toddler class, I have babies, like I would survive. I just don't want to have to do it at home and do it in church. right? And so sometimes we have domestic workers that come and tell us, I've seen people say, can you imagine? She says she doesn't work in a house with children, and you're angry. Someone is telling you ahead of time that they don't do well with children. And instead of you to take it as good information, data, you're getting angry. You're saying she even has a choice. Yeah. And that's the mentality, the mindset I'm hoping that we start to change. They have a choice. They should have a choice. Maybe a lot of the things they didn't tell us during our interview processes, especially in Nigeria, is when you go for a job interview, you are also checking out the organization. It's not a one-sided relationship, no. You're going to check them out, and they're supposed to be checking you out too. And you should be able to walk away saying, this organization is not a good fit for me. I've worked in organizations that I felt I need to run out of here because as much as the money is good, we're not compatible. I don't like how you guys do your things, blah, blah, blah. Like they have a choice. And this is, I want us to up our mentality, up our mindsets. These people have a choice. Anyway, so I'm hoping that after our conversation today, that you're moving from urgency, because that's another thing I've noticed about our hiring process is that we're hiring urgently. Something happens, you have to travel, you're a working mom, you start sending word out, you guys, please, I'm looking for a nanny. Quick, quick, quick. The person comes, you sabi cookies, okay. Oh yeah, the next one I'm traveling, I'll be giving the rest of the instruction from Calabar, from Kaduna, from California, like you're just on the go. I'm hoping that we move away from a traditional hiring process of urgency to where we start to look for identity. We stop doing just recommendations alone and relying on recommendations, but that we're checking for cultural alignment. That we're no longer doing things desperately, but we're also doing character assessment. That we're not making assumptions. That someone doesn't just come to your house and say, you sabi do this, you sabi do this. They say, yes, you work on those assumptions. Then tomorrow you say, she lied to me. That we're doing due diligence and we're being very intentional. I'm hoping that we're moving from having a home where there are no clear expectations, and we'll talk about that in week 3, to a home where there are clear family values that guide our expectations from our domestic workers. So my question to you today is, what would you do differently? You can share out in the comment section if anything stood out to you. You can also just reflect and write and journal about it. But I genuinely am interested in understanding if I don't want us to just come and talk and feel sober. One thing, just one. Say from today, I'm going to do this differently. That's all. Just one thing. We're all building a family culture, and I want us to know that it's not having that culture conversation is not a one thing, it's not a one-time thing. There are things that happen in my life, and I'm like, you know what? We should add this to our family values. So there is the personal value, but there's also family values. Your family values are me and my husband coming together and saying, these are the things we want to be known as a family for. We combine our values together and we say, we have some of them we have printed out and our children know. These are the things we're starting to emphasize. These are the things that change how we act towards one another and towards the people that come into our homes. So if you remember nothing else from tonight, remember that there are 3 convictions. First, the culture of your home begins with you. Your domestic worker does not create the culture of your home. They simply experience, reinforce, and eventually reflect it. Secondly, you don't just hire for competence, you hire for character and culture fit. Skills often can be taught. You can teach somebody how to be honest, you can teach someone to wash plates. You can teach someone how you want your children to be bathed. But character is cultivated over time. Culture determines both the employer and the employee and determines whether or not they can thrive together. Finally, never underestimate the power of intentional leadership. The same way employers go to leadership schools and get better, especially leaders, the same way they get better at employing. Some of us need to go to school, and that's what Educate the Citizens is doing, is that we're creating a learning opportunity. But I need you to start to think of yourself as a leader in the home. Anything you want, model it. You want excellence, don't cut corners. You want a domestic worker that tells the truth. Don't lie. Don't do those white lies. Someone calls you, you say, they're on my way. You're in front of the domestic worker. Those are your values. Those are your culture. You're creating a culture automatically. Like it's not rocket science. So I want us to start to think about the fact that we are domestic leaders. We're leaders and we want us to be more intentional. The home you desire tomorrow is being built by the decisions you make today. One conversation, one interview, one act of kindness, one clear expectation, one value at a time. Because at the end of the day, you're not simply hiring someone to help run your home. You're inviting somebody who is supposed to be a partner with you in shaping your home. So please choose wisely and become the person who an employee will be happy to work with. Thank you so much. I feel like I have been rambling, and I'm just going to pause and see if we have 5 minutes for questions or feedback. What stood out to you? Thank you so much for listening. And I saw the hearts that people were sending. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm going to keep quiet right now and hand over to Miss Nkem as you share your feedback in the comment section or just unmute yourself and ask any question.
Thank you very much, Shakazim Adindu. What an amazing session. What stood out to you, our beautiful audience? Can you please share with us? Let's know your light bulb moments and questions.
We have a question from Adobe.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for this session, Miss Chagoziem. Yeah, I know it's my first time and it was quite impromptu, but I just wanted to break the silence. At some point when you were asking, wanted to speak up, nobody was saying anything. But yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this session, and I like that this session is actually aligned to purpose, because a lot of times when we talk about work, it's not just work. It's about, like you said, who are we? And purpose actually starts from the family. So personally, I really do think that in as much as we bring in staff, it's also important to also see what are we giving them back. And that's where your message of value and alignment really speaks well to me. So like you said, if we really do not if you do not really build values for yourself, if you really do not stand to probably map out what values mean to you, or what are the values you and your family hold dear, sometimes you really do not have the right to have so much expectations from this domestic worker. So for me, my take home is to first of all map out value for myself. Secondly, to ask what value am I also giving out to these people? What do I want them to learn? Because so I've had interactions with domestic workers, and I see sometimes they do not even come as bad people in themselves. Yeah, sometimes they learn to be better people from you, and sometimes they come to a place and they're like, what am I even doing here? So so I think I was speaking with a friend and she made a statement and she said, if somebody always complains that their mate steals from them, please check them. They're probably starving their mates. She said it was a conversation, but she said it carelessly. But I went home. We're having a random conversation from a movie we watched, and that thing spoke to me, because a lot of times, if you actually sit to observe, these people do not even come with those values in the first place. We force them. So thank you so much. And my take home, and to everybody, I think we should also look out for ourselves, map out our values before we are able to, point fingers. So thank you.
Amazing.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dobie. Without much ado, I'm excited to introduce our next speaker.
Okay,
Please
sorry,
join me.
Miss Nkem. I think we have another question from Amaka.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, good.
Okay.
Okay, good evening, ma'am. Good evening. I don't know if you can hear me.
Very well. We can hear you very well.
Yes, we can. Okay. Okay, I asked my question in the comment section, but I just wanted to make some comments, my take home. I'm very happy to be part of this. Thank you so much because even before a friend of mine sent me the link, I've always been thinking about stuff like this, domestic workers. I come from the southeast, and I know people from my place they always there. It's always a general knowledge that the southeastern women always have issues with their domestic workers. Some employ children, not really employed, but get children to work around their house. And I myself has firsthand lived that experience, not intentionally though, when I was living with my aunt while going to school. So somehow I was doubling as a domestic worker, and even when they got another extra domestic worker. So I firsthand experienced all this, having to, when they go for visits with other women, with other domestic workers and the girls, I see them live with, and then there's always this complaints, my help this, my help that, this person is this. I was part of the complaints too. So it's always really a very touching something for me. I felt like there has to be something to be done about this. Why is it all maids are bad, all madams are good, or maybe all maids are good, the madams are wicked here and there. And so coming to have something, see something like this, I really like it. I really love it because it means that people are thinking about this, how to make this better. So thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And I actually sent out links. I hope that more people will really join because I know someone has reached out and say, "Do you know any help?" I say, "Ah, I don't know, but I'll ask for you." So these are the conversations that keep going. It's something we need to really talk about. And my question on the in the comment section was that like based on that personal values, I think it's very important. So I asked, what are the questions once someone can ask themselves to really pick when you're in a situation, like, I know I have values, but I want to point out what exactly really matters to me so that you don't just be at a, confused place. So thank you so much, man. It was wonderful. Thank you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amaka. I laughed a lot when you said all employees are bad and all it's exactly almost always the same story. And I totally appreciate you just sharing for being very candid. And again, thank you even for sharing our link. I'm hoping that we have more people coming to this conversation. Everything you said is so on point. If same thing with the lady that spoke before. I can't see her again, but it was just so good. First of all, I
So
want to react to the fact that yes, we can't have expectations from people that we have not trained, right? You can't give what you don't have. You don't even know what to expect if you're not expressly clear on what that looks like, right? But more importantly, I like the question about where to find your personal values. I just realized that I didn't get to the very last slide in my presentation. I had a QR code. So I'm going to put the link in the comment section. There are many resources out there. This is just one of them. There are many resources out there. I just put one now that can help you understand your personal values. A lot of them. But I would say that for me, authentically, I've had to rely very much on people. Like my own experience with personal value is that it comes with you. That's why you can see two siblings and you're like, this one's values are different. This one's personality is different. It's more than personality. And I'm happy for us to have this conversation. We're definitely going to have more of this conversation in the domestic employer circle. Please, everyone should try to join. What the conversations we're having here are just to whet appetite to get the conversation rolling. But the bulk of the impactful work, the main work is going to be in the domestic employer circle. We're going to be having conversations round the year, every month, different focus on different things. But I want us to you can just click on the link I sent and explore. But your values come with you. Usually, you hear people say the same thing to you, like, since you were a child, I've noticed you're always this. You're always passionate about this. For me, as a child, I used to buy markets that nobody was selling. If you look for someone's trouble beside me, I fought for them effortlessly. I don't know why I was like that. It's just how I've always found myself. My second son is like that. he gets in trouble in school, you best believe that he was fighting for somebody he felt needed justice. It's just him, right? So your follow-come personalities usually will be introduced to you by people if people are very observant about you as a child, and then somehow as you grow, you start to notice that there are other things that matter to you, right? Effortlessly. If you're not thinking, there's a way you show up. I'm not talking about vices, I'm saying your values, like the good ways you show up without thinking. Just that consistent way you continue to show up in your friendships, in your relationships, in your dedication, in the choices you're making. So there's a whole conversation about personal values, and I don't want us to go into it, but I just want you to know that we'll have that conversation continuously. We will have another session where we're doing just values identification, and that's something I'm very passionate about, and I've had to teach for many years. So start with that link I sent, and then let's continue in the domestic employer circle. Thank you so much for your questions. We will have to run because we have another speaker for today. Over to Miss Nkem.
Thank you so much, Chakozim. Okay, our next speaker, Ugonna Ajoku, is an international development professional with 17 years of experience managing donor-funded programs in livelihoods, agriculture, and social development across Nigeria. Her work has included a significant focus on safeguarding with program oversight, responsibilities, covering safeguarding, compliance, and risk management. She has completed training on sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment prevention. Underpinned by her border work, mainstreaming gender across complex programs. Ugonna has also served as a youth minister, providing pastoral care, spiritual guidance, and mentorship to young people, which is something she's deeply passionate about. She's currently completing an MSc in Circular Economy and Sustainable Innovation at ESDES Business School, UCLY, France. Make welcome Ugonna Ajoku. Welcome, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can see and hear me. Can you hear me?
Ma'am. We can.
Okay. I can't see myself. Sounds like Frank. I can't see myself, but yeah, let me manage this technology the way it is managing me. Lovely to have everyone on. My brother is here and a few other of my fans. It's amazing how you speak, and even no matter how often you speak, you still get a bit nervous about speaking. So while I get this to work, so my name is Ugonna, and today I'll be talking about safeguarding and sex-proofing your home. Let's talk about sex, baby. You know that song that people look at like it's a bad song. It probably is, I don't know. We shouldn't have been singing it, but hey. So we're going to talk about sex-proofing your home, and it's quite an interesting topic. And I'm going to start with a story. One of the, let me see, just hold on. Let me see if I can get this to work. Can you see the screen I'm sharing?
Yes. Do you need me to share it from my end, or can you?
Maybe, because I would like to see my notes as well, if it's possible. Yeah. So do I stop sharing and then you take over, Samash?
Yes, I'll share from my end.
Okay. Well, let me just keep going so it doesn't.
Okay.
So, sex-proofing. Oh, good evening, everyone. My name is Ugonna, and I'll introduce myself when I get there. Yeah. So this is week 2 of the Domestic Worker Series, and fantastic Chiagozim. I've known her for quite a while. And they just turned 10 years in their wedding. So hey, don't play. Congratulations to
Thank you.
Frank. And her sister was spoke last week. It was very, very insightful. So let me go ahead and then I'll introduce myself. So check, let me know when you're ready. So every day, like the last commenter said, I mean, that was very truthful. certain people from certain parts, to which I am from, Chiagosem is from. It seems to be the story, right, about abuse. So you just say in the papers, if you don't live in Nigeria or you have not been in the social media, this lady with the knife and the child and the thing was so grotesque and so gruesome. I have refused to go and see what the whole thing is about. Check out me. Are you ready to take over? Just let me know when you're ready. So you can see it's in the news. It's nothing. So you got there. Say
Sorry,
what?
can everybody see my screen?
Or is it mine? I think it might be
Yes,
mine because I
yes.
might need to stop. Can you see hers or
Okay.
mine? Then I should stop sharing.
Yeah, you need to
Sama?
stop. I'm sharing.
Okay, Sama.
So yeah, I'm sharing the knife one, and I can go back if you want me to start from the
Okay, so
beginning.
that's the second one. That's good. Thank you very much. So it's a knife one. So yes, so that's sort of what we see these days, and it's gotten worse and worse. It's very sad, but it's gotten worse and worse. And I don't know what it is. I don't know. Someone had told me years ago how her mother had. She said anytime because I speak really fast, so I need to slow down. Anytime her mother-in-law would visit, the mother-in-law could not understand why the domestic staff was sitting at the table to eat with them. She'd want them to either eat in the kitchen and sit on the floor or something very archaic. I don't know where we picked it up from, but okay. So let me introduce myself. My name is Ugonna. So the next slide, please, Chekos. My name is Ugonna. I'm a development expert with almost 2 decades of working. I've worked across gender and safeguarding, worked across social development and advocacy. I've worked across livelihoods and economic development programs. I've worked with young people as a mentor and a teacher, mostly in a religious capacity and also out of it. I love to speak, I love to write, and I'm passionate about people living up to their full God-given potential. I like to call myself the connector because I always know someone who knows someone. I know someone. My nicknames, people call me Kwekpeye, Yuji Baby, Afiamma, Ugo One, Yellow Sisi of the Most High, Uibo. So it depends on who it is. And so those are the names my friends call me. So what is safeguarding? Are we on the 4th slide? I can't see, I'm not watching the thing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what is safeguarding? Let's just talk about the basics of it. You can see the picture there with the harm, abuse, exploitation, physical, emotional, neglect, physical, sexual, all of that. And the people under there, the children and the young people, vulnerable adults. I was thinking today about when I had a surgery in 2022. I think that is one of the most vulnerable I have felt. And it began to make me understand aging and understand being sick and understand sort of being dependent on people. And it was not without its risks because although my family was around me, my sister was there, there was a particular doctor who would come in, young man, I wasn't attracted to him at all, about my age, yes. He'd come and he'd begin to rub my skin, my hand. And my sister picked it up before I was, because of course I was delirious. I just wanted to be well. And my healing took a little longer than it should have. And so I was just, and then you'd have another doctor and he would come in and he would say, oh, madam, I'd like to see your maybe midriff or examine your tummy. He would make sure that you're well covered and only the part that he needs to see is exposed. Do you understand? This other guy was just with a lack of boundaries. And I'm going to talk about that. So just imagine that my sister was not there. My sister, my son was not having it. And of course, I did a report to the owner of the clinic, who was a lady, and I had words. I hardly ever run out of words. I had words. And so if I could feel that vulnerable, how much more people in your home, whether a girl who comes in to work with you or or your child or someone who needs to be protected. So why is safeguarding important? So we'll just define it a bit. It says it's a proactive process, not the word proactive. It's a proactive process of protecting vulnerable individuals, such as children and at risk in adults from harm, from abuse and neglect. Neglect is one of the words I've words I learned first. My mom was teaching me scripture, and she was teaching me how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation. So that's like, I don't know, that's like one of the first like word. I was just like, I must have been like 5 or so. So I used to call it neglect. Anyway, so what is SEER? So SEER is sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. It's a critical safeguarding term. It is used in humanitarian and development contexts and is used around human rights violation. There are 3 principles of safeguarding, and it has to be that people have to be protected in your care. There has to be preventative action. So you put things in place to make sure that people are protected and that you have a collective responsibility to anybody in your care. It is called duty of care for a reason. I'm going to introduce you to the person who is my safeguarding hero. If we could go to the next slide, please. I'm operating a little blindly because I'm on my own slide, just trying to make sure I don't miss out on anything. But before I introduce you to my hero, I'll tell you a story. One of the stories I've heard that I don't know what it has done to me, but it was very painful. A young lady went to live with her uncle somewhere in the north. They were of a certain extraction, so they were not Northerners, but he had lived there for a bit. He was her father's brother. And on this day, the father's brother's wife, so our uncle's wife, goes for a night vigil, all night. If you're of Nigerian, whatever, goes for all night. And that night, her uncle comes into the room. She was 8. She was 8. And her uncle rapes her and makes her swear by the Bible. Now, if she told anybody that she would die. This girl lived with this pain for 8 years. Did not tell anybody, could not tell anybody. I was the second individual that she had mentioned it to. And I couldn't cry, but my inside was bleeding. She had mentioned to her father eventually, and the father was threatening to kill the brother. And rightly so. And rightly so. Those sorts of things should be made, but the lawyer said, let me shut up. Rightly so. And when you think about it, would you say that woman should not have left her? It's his niece. Should she not have left the niece in his care? Like, really, what was she supposed to do? Take her along with her? But I always say there are always signs, but I'll get back to it. So if we're on the slide that has my safeguarding hero, I'll introduce you to Reverend Ajoku. My father was he's the first person who spoke to us about safeguarding. He didn't use that word, but we had lessons on it. Reverend Ajoku would have lessons about how to deal with, please let me know if this fan is making noise a bit. Let me just turn it off just in case, just a minute. Reverend Ajoku would have you, we had lessons on it. I'll come back to the lessons. There were no sharing of rooms by siblings of the opposite sex. I have one brother. I think the first time my brother and I ever spent the night on the same bed was maybe 6, 7 years ago. And it was mistakenly, like, we had gisted and dozed off, right? So my father, we just always thought he was a bit extreme, and he would say, I spent some time in America, I had stories. So he didn't want to hear it. My father would not let us walk around the house, and some families, I have some friends that do the bra and pants culture, or they are just walking as naked I came into this world, naked I be, my bed, not in my father's house. In fact, because of how busy the house was back in the day, singlets and boxers were not something that the men around the house wore, right? So you were just dressed appropriately. I'll come back to boundaries later. Personal space is important. And from the get-go, my father would always say, know your personal space. You're talking too close. Like, even up to today, when I have people sort of come too close, I move backwards. You keep coming, I move backwards. I keep moving, or I say, oh, please, do you want to watch that? My father had issues with people who would sit and I think they call it man spreading now, but you just sit and you can't keep your legs together. Like, we literally had lessons. I'm not even joking. How to comport yourself, which was his favorite word. Comport yourself, favorite phrase. And personal effects. Reverend Ajaku, for the life of him, cannot understand why people share towels or combs, or, I've had someone come to visit and sorry, it's a no in my father's house. So the next slide, please. Okay, So like I mentioned, he was the first person who spoke to us about safeguarding. He didn't really use that word, but we had lessons on it. We had lessons on what to do if a man claims he wants to buy himself because of you. My father would literally say, well, how would you respond? So we had to be, we were taught lessons on how not to open the door to strangers, lessons on how to sit as a man, lessons on being conscious that a woman is sitting beside you. So, these things they do in like taxis or at benches in parks where a woman is sitting, a man is sitting. I don't know you from Adam, but you just feel comfortable that you can put your hand over the back of the chair. My father just could not understand it, and he taught us how to say no. So up till today, if I'm sat anywhere and someone who I don't know, who I'm not in a relationship with, or I would ask you, could you please drop your hands? And sometimes your armpits are smelling. Like, why do I have to be in contact with that? Like, why don't you know how to manage your space, your personal space? And so these were the things that happened. I remember it's like someone who's like an older brother, Baudelaire. So I've known him for many years, and the twins, maybe and Priye, would want to, they'd be going to his house like after church on Sunday. And Reverend Ajoko would tell me, no. And the thing he always said to us was, others may, you cannot. Boundaries. Boundaries is a very important word. And I'm going to speak on it later, but boundaries is a very important word. Next slide, please. So we should be on slide 7 by now. The thing my father did would be that he would pop up from work, middle of the day. At the time, he was a lecturer, so he had some time on his hands. He would just sneak into the house to see what we were doing. There were, then as we grew older, he had this 30 minutes visit window. My father is very dramatic, so so if a guy came to see, he would even ask you to bring your friends to the house. My mom and him were like, bring your friends home. They want to know who you're talking to and who's talking to you. And also guys would come to the house. Because he has 4 girls, there was a rumor that, he had a double barrel at home and stuff like that. And then of course he's a man of the cloth. So there was always that. And he had this thing about, do not be alone with a man, a male visitor or whatever, anywhere really. No, I don't know if we kept it, but no standing on the streets to talk to a boy. That was ingrained in us. Till today, I think maybe unless I'm walking, I'm not really someone who stands to talk to people on the way. No visiting of relatives, so we're not going to visit any relative. No relative was going to see us. I remember one time I had a neighbor where we lived. He had spoken to me in a certain way. I started being very, what's the word? You know how people are trying to be funny with a young girl? I just went straight to my father. Daddy, this is what this guy is doing. My father called him to the parlor, sat him down in front of me. He said, I might be a preacher, but I don't play with my girls. Like, I don't play. Like, you want to see the side of me touch these women. And that guy behaved himself from that day. Right? I know that not everybody has had the privilege or the opportunity to have a strong, and my father he's not all these alpha male, walking around. He's quite gentle, but he's firm, So not everybody would have that. And I know that there are people in situations of single parenting, whether as men or as women, but so I think having that security consciousness, not paranoia, where you know that there are people who are depending on you, whose safety is dependent on how you move. I know someone who leaves his house every day that God created on this earth. Uncle goes out to drink. I'm not saying you should not be socialite. Who am I? God forbid I'll say a thing like that. But every day that the sun shines and sets, this guy goes out at a particular time in the evening and returns at a particular. And if I were a bad person, and I'm not, if I work with a kidnapping group, and I'm not, do you know what I mean? Like, you're leaving your family exposed, and it is your son who opens the gate for you to go out every evening. And tomorrow that child, if he doesn't break that habit, will come and be a problem to somebody. But you're not even thinking of safety when you put your family out like that. Next slide, please. The potter's house. So this is Jeremiah 18:4 for those of us who are religious. And it says, and the vessel that he was making of the clay was marred or spoiled in the potter's hand, and he reworked it into another vessel as it seemed good to the potter to do. When I used to read the scripture in my childhood days, I always wondered that, if the potter is God, why does the clay get marred in his hands? And then I heard a preaching by Uduak Basi Daniel, I think that's her name, Pastor Uduak Basi Daniel. And she explains that And I'll go back to something my father always says, the enemy is a patient fisherman. You know how in our parts we fish for sustenance, and someone abroad would fish for as recreation. So the enemy is a recreational fisherman. He sits there, he's in no hurry. He's happy to let, you know how I always tease up how the fish will take the bait, and then the white man would release the fishing rope. And so the fish is now going, the fish is now passing through. His friends and neighbors are like, my brethren, thank the Lord. Oh. I almost got cooked. I almost got hooked today, but this Jesus has saved me. Help me. Going to his neighbors to greet them. All the while not knowing that the bait is already in its mouth. That's how the enemy is. And so she said that the porter would have all these good plans, but the enemy introduces pornography. The enemy introduces incest. The enemy introduces abuse. The enemy introduces all sorts of things into the house. And I'm saying that to say that my childhood was full of play. I think I used to say we saw the grandfather of play. We had parks, we ran. So it was with the Ekbas, the Basses, and the Ikwats. So you can probably guess where I grew up. And even with all these rules that my father had, some things still slipped through. And how did that slip through? We had people come to visit and stay. And at some point, there was a steady supply of adult magazines. My brother is here, probably hearing for the first time. And where did it come from? That older person who came to live was getting a steady supply from a neighbor. And we hid it under our mattress. And then one time, we went to stay somewhere. Our parents had to be away. And I stumbled on some adult books. And that began a thorn in my flesh, a constant battle to stay free. I'm saying all this to say, we can put all these as much as humanly possible, and the enemy can still enemy. That's why he's an enemy. What could my parents have done in those days? Perhaps, I remember the first time my mother heard me use the F word. Oh, my mother is very dramatic too. Oh, my mother fell on the floor. My mother cried. I remember them taking me into the room, my father's study, to question me about how I picked it up. It was all from those magazines. And I have the names, I could give them to you. There were other things that came in, but yeah. So I'm just saying to say that your eyes just need to be peeled, because the potter's house, it says the clay was marred in his hands, but then he walked it into another vessel. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay.
We're back to safe.
Yes. So this is a different one. Talks about the hours of safeguarding. So like I said, you recognize it. What are the physical and emotional and sexual or financial signs and symptoms of abuse? I'm just making a note to remind myself of the story. So we were all here when a particular doctor, very popular doctor, gynecologist or obstetrician, was in the news because what had happened, his wife had found out that said doctor, she had insisted on having videos, cameras everywhere in the house. Said doctor insisted that I beg you, anything you're doing, don't bring it to my room, no, to my study. So she didn't put it in his study. Unbeknownst to her, or unknowingly to her, like Nigerians say, unknowingly to her, that was where this man was perpetuating atrocities against her niece, her ward, who had grown up calling him daddy. Let that sink in. And this girl, according to the woman, began to react, rebel. And she was just like, what's wrong with this child? And the average Nigerian woman, like Chia Gosdem said, beating and all. I don't even know why people do that to people's children, but what do I know? And she started beating the girl, everything, and the girl was just getting more and more rebellious. And the day she complained, the husband was like, no problems, I'll handle it. The husband now, found a way for them to ship the girl out. It was later on the lady heard what had really happened, because this girl was feeling so betrayed that why would this be happening in front of your eyes and you cannot see that something is changing? Can you not see? Sometimes it's just a cry for help, and it was a cry for help. bear in mind that abuse of power is a thing. It's a thing. And we can deny all we want, but it's a thing. What is your response when they come to you? A girl comes and says, this is what happened. Your help comes and says, the uncle that is living with me is touching me, or your relative is doing this, or even your husband is doing this, or that. What is your response? Can your daughter, can your child, God forbid, come and say, Mommy, this is what I'm feeling, or this is what's going on? And you will say, you're always imagining things. It's not that TV you're watching, or you're lying, you know? What is your response? What is your stance towards it? Then, of course, this other part has to do with like officially documenting concerns in exact detail, escalating them to designated authority. So years ago, Christy Bature had given a thing about teaching her children, you know, the parts of the body that song and who should not touch you, all of that. And she then mentioned that her daughter, I think, came back one day. No, sorry, it was they were little children. So she came in and they were like, oh, mommy, can we talk to you? So I think the last two or something. So she asked the others to go. And then this one says, oh, Uncle so-and-so, maybe gatesman or driver, was touching her in her boobs or something. Oh, Jesus. The woman said, she had to tell her husband, you need to take off this guy or I would literally kill him. Have the access so that children can come and tell you when things are not right. Because if they're not talking to you, they're talking to me. They talk to me. They talk to me in church. They talk to me. They talk to me. I'm Antigona for a reason. They talk to me. They talk to me. They talk to and some of these things are happening. I mean, if you're like a Muslim, then maybe marrying your cousin is not such a big deal. But if you're not, right, and you're a Christian, it's a big deal. And then I've had people come and say, "Oh, my cousin is getting frisky with me. My cousin is trying to," and all of them they're in the same house with the parents, or the cousin comes to visit and nobody's telling the parents what's going on. A lot of times we focus our energy on the girls, and I mean, rightly so, because research shows that 90% of sexual abuse cases internationally are perpetrated by men on women, right? But this time today, I'm going to talk about our boys. So next slide, please. Our boys. This is actually there's actually a group called For Our Boys. So our boys. Many of the men I know. So next slide, please. So I don't belong to the school of whataboutism. When they say, women are, what's that thing we say? It's always a man. And they say, what about? I'm not inside that what about drama. Women are being sexually harassed. Women are being, 1 in 2 women can tell you an experience she's had. Sexual harassment, sexual abuse. That's a normal. That is our unfortunate normal. But I want to also just speak on boys because I've interacted with quite a few men. And this is why I'm addressing it. Ask the men around you, what was your first sexual experience and with whom? And if they're honest, they will tell you. So there's a part of teaching your boys consent, but also the part of protecting your boys. Have these conversations and have them early. 45% of sexual abuse of boys is committed by men and 55% by women. So nannies, older sisters, friends, neighbors, aunties, these boys were 5, they were 6, they were 11. I know of someone who was 11. And what was the effect of that? He couldn't keep his thing in his pants. Half of his marriage had cheated with someone else. How does it lead? It leads to an insatiable sex drive, fetishes, seeing women as objects, objectifying women. Some just go to the other side and, swing to the other side. So these are scary numbers. For the girls, the international rate, girls is 13 to 20%. For the boys, is 5 to 8%. I'm going to talk to you about a story I heard some time ago. So, like I said, people call me Antigona, and my friend's son, at the time we didn't know he was autistic, so he was really young, and she has other children. So some would go for like a meeting, and this boy would just throw himself on the floor, just act out. And because I don't beat people's children, that day I'd had enough. It's gone on for weeks, and I'd gotten a little comfortable with her, but I'm still very careful around people whom I don't know. But that day I just took the boy and took him to the kitchen of the house where we were in, and I said to him, if you ever do this thing that you did. So he was just there, And so they began to use my name at home. I heard later, you're doing this, we'll call Antigona, we'll tell Antigona. I said he will really adjust himself. So, I mean, every family has that person that they would call. I mean, the boy is all grown up now and all. So, and you say, oh, Antigona, I'm taller than you, that kind of thing. So, but I'm saying that to say that then this happens in another situation where a boy who used to be very, not rascally, but just boisterous and a boy, right? The mother noticed that every time she would call this particular teacher, his home teacher's name, he would tense up and he would, so they just thought, oh, it's the same effect, right, of this uncle. Only to find out that somehow this son of a gun, this Satan's spawn, was defiling this boy right on the veranda of their house where lessons were going on. So that's why this boy was quiet and couldn't speak. And it was his sister who finally told the mom, we cannot put our heads in the sand anymore. Not this time. We had, in our time, we had a lot of girls who is the father's brother, or is an uncle, the father's friend, or is a relative. We had boys have the same experiences. But everybody would just say, he's a man, he enjoyed it. What is a 6-year-old boy enjoying in sex? I spoke to someone some time ago, and he literally had to run out of an older woman's, a married woman's house. He was about, what, 16? He literally escaped, and the parents didn't know why she wasn't speaking to him anymore. Why do you even allow a teenager go over there all the time alone? I wouldn't allow a teenager go over there, boy, to a woman's house who is mostly alone. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. Have conversations about sex. Do not shy away from them. Talk about it. Because if your children are of a certain age, or your words are of a certain age, they are having those conversations with other people. They're having those conversations with other people. And if you do it too much in church, you'll say, we're always teaching about sex, but moving on. So, next slide, please. So, how much time do I have?
5 more minutes.
5, girl. You were here. Wow.
Sorry, someone was saying, please, can you increase your volume?
My volume. Oh, okay. Is it loud? Is it better now? I hope it got work.
Yes, I mean, I was hearing you. Just wondering if it's possible to increase it more.
Okay, I said the highest. So the reason why there are 2 things in this presentation that represent me. One is this eagle that is here. My name is Ugonna, and the other is my father. So hey, they had to show up. So this is the eagle, and the eagle has something called mombrelline, where it covers its young, both parents actually, well, mostly the female, covers its young. They're able to sort of spray it, sort of protect it from harsh conditions and all of that. And it's not just the female, but it's also the eagle parents, they co-parent, and they work together to hunt and defend the nest. It's a 2-person affair. Nothing, woman protects the home. Oh, woman is not, no. It's not working these days. And the reason why my mom is there is because my people pray. You need to pray. At the end of it, you shall need to pray, because the Bible says, except the Lord builds the house, except he watches over our house, all of us are wasting our time. And it's important to make this point, because my mom is a dreamer. In fact, all the girls dream. I don't know about my father and my brother, but yeah, all the girls dream. And the things I have seen in dreams, Chagozi knows of some of the dreams I've had, right? So my father uses his physical eyes to protect us and pray over us. My mother uses her spiritual eyes. There's hardly anything that happens in my parents' house that someone doesn't see beforehand. Like, it doesn't happen, right? My mom insisted on devotions, regardless of whether my father was available or not, or around or not, or if my father is like me, he's not a morning person. So sometimes he'll join, or sometimes he'll be away on a trip. I will tell two dreams quickly, and then I'll move on. So they're telling me I have 5 minutes. So there was a dream about my immediate younger sister was, my mother had a dream. We were children, and there was a man in our church who was, what were we hearing when Jules came on? Something Abels. Yeah, so he was physically, he was disabled, like physically unable to work. And I think, did he use crutches? I don't remember, but I remember him. And my mom has a dream, and in the dream, the man is sitting, and then he changes to my immediate younger sister. My mom rushes and holds the leg, and she's shaking the leg and speaking in tongues. My dad is Baptist, so, The older Baptists, they don't really do that. But my mom, she gave her fire. She was speaking in tongues. She prayed and prayed and prayed until she woke up. I remember it. It's one of my core memories. I must have been in, I don't remember. Maybe it was nursery 1 or 2, because I was really young. And they called me, what had happened? The British lady school went to, the British lady they had put a swing, what's that thing? The slide, a new slide. And my sister had gone up on it and come down. I think all the children had. And for some weird reason, that slide metal falls on my sister's legs, just like my mom saw in the dream. I remember there were no phones at the time, of course. So I remember that they had to call one of my father's close friends who lived behind the school. They had to, so I had to follow to the hospital. I remember where we went to, the hospital we went to. I remember that they had to reach out to my father. My mom was not in town when this happened. She traveled, but that experience never left me. The second dream is about my darling brother that is on this call. When he was in the university, my mom had a dream, and she had a dream that she was back to, because she spent years, her childhood in the north, that she was back to the north, and I think there was a coffin or something funny like that. And when she looked inside, I don't know if it was my father or my brother, something weird like that. So she wakes up and she tells my father, "So let us fast." So father said, "Yeah, okay, we'll do it next Wednesday." She said she started praying. My brother's school had a riot or something, and with the university, whatever. And that day he had called me to go and see, wanting to go and see someone in his town, So I gave him the person's number. That's how my brother escaped, with literally the clothes on his back. Literally. So I'm saying that to say that whether you're a woman or a man, you need to watch over your family spiritually. They need to be able to know, your children need to be able to know that if anything is going on, God will show mommy in the dream. God will show daddy in the dream. So you need to have a close relationship with your words as well. Sometimes teenagers will tell us how, the mother saw a name on the phone that looked like the man's name, and then she flung the phone on the wall. Madam, you should calm down. If you like, calm down. If you like, calm down. Have a conversation, have a close relationship with your words. Even with the domestic worker that comes, there's a way they come into the house and they can't stay. There are times in my parents' house where, when I was younger, they would leave the same day. They go about, maybe they poured. I heard one in one of our friends' houses where they had poured water on the floor and she couldn't cross the water. What was the issue? She couldn't cross water, she fainted. What was the issue? My father was a native doctor. Prayer, please, prayer, prayer, prayer. Yes, next slide. And I think we should be going towards the end, hopefully. Oh my Lord. Okay. Next slide, please. So what are the signs? I've heard of some people doing bad girl escapades in their parents' house. If you're old and enough and you want to do it with the person that they brought to the house, by all means, but not with children, not with words, not that someone who's working for you and they're not comfortable in the house. Is your domestic worker suddenly reluctant to enter a particular room when your spouse or somebody else is staying in that house? Is present? Has a once boisterous child or word suddenly gone quiet? Does the domestic worker suddenly look panicked when you're about to leave home? What is your gut telling you? And I've put some empty spaces there because there's always something to fill. Your child, do you check their body often, depending on their age? Has your child started using strange vocabulary? It's always a sign. If your child doesn't want to greet a person and they're not just being dramatic, pay attention. Your child, do they look uncomfortable around said worker or your house resident? And there are other spaces there. What is your gut telling you? Next slide, please. I call these tools of the trade. So there's a background check there, which you guys all do before you get your person to work for you. And the Holy Bible, like I said, you see this truth here, but you have to tell yourself the truth. There's something that Victoria Renz said in one of her songs I like. She says, tell yourself the truth and I will tell myself the truth. It's something I enjoy saying. Tell yourself the truth. If you know you married a woman who is angry and can beat up a child mercilessly, especially when that child is not her own, tell yourself the truth. I was watching Monica recently, or someone sent it to me to watch as my first child. I couldn't watch it. It was just too much for me. But I got to the point where I also got to the point where the mom, she went to sell stuff, and then she was telling mom, the way this man is touching me, the way he talks to me. No wonder it's like, just allow him. Just say, no, what does he want now? Hey, my mother resisted. If I'm going to the market with her, you say, my wife, my color. My mother will tell you she's not your wife. She's not your color. So tell yourself the truth. Swallow the truth pill. If you know who you married, you know you cannot see a skirt walk past, no matter who is wearing the skirt. Tell yourself the truth. Tell yourself the truth. Ensure your house with all the right equipment, the hidden cameras where possible when you start suspecting things. The cameras, put those things in. A lot will help us and we also help ourselves. Next is boundaries. So teach your child the body. They have the body song. Their body is their body and they honor their boundaries. My friend, a guy, tells me that when he bathes his children, his daughters, he tells them, no other person is allowed to watch your private part, not even me, the man. Only your mom and your grandmom. I remember balking when he said it, but actually, he says, actually, nobody else should. My father, who is a father of 4 girls, knocks on the door and waits for a response before he walks in. Don't shut your children up. Oh, you talk too much. Let them talk. It's in that talking that you hear. Oh. It's in that talking that is your salvation. Oh. Teach them the body song. My head is this, my body is this, that thing. You guys know it. Also, teach them to honor their intuition. And intuition saves us so much. Instinct is different from intuition. Intuition is what you're learning it, but even the instinct works. For example, I'm not a girl who just doesn't like people. I hardly ever see anybody and just, I don't like it. What's the always feeling like? You will never catch me there. However, when I do say, or I say, that person, just there's something about that. But once I do that, my family and friends know to pay attention because trust me, if it's 8 months, 6 months, 5 months, 5 years, that's something about that person will show. I remember being somewhere and I used to tell my friends, there's something about this person. I was supposed to respect who this person was. So sometimes I'll see this person come and we'll go and turn around. And eventually when we found out why everybody, I had forgotten I was saying, everybody was like, you see this thing you said, bah. As well, it also happened when I was much younger. I just kept telling my parents, there's something about this person, there's something about this guy, there's something, and then we found out 1 or 2 things about this guy. I'm moving to the next slide, please. And I think I'm almost done. Honor your intuition, particularly mothers. Honor your intuition. Stop ignoring what you are sensing and pushing it away. Honor your intuition. Don't be the reason that somebody has to pay for therapy in the future. I know one of our therapists is going to speak to us, who is a cousin of mine, in a few weeks. Well, don't be the reason that you're funding her account. Somebody's funding her account because you did not do what you should have done. If something feels off, it probably is. It probably is. There's a difference between paranoia and discernment. Please work in discernment. Allow people access. Let them tell you what's happening. Don't be always barking. You're not a dog. Stop always shouting. What's the problem? Stop always seeking perfection. And like Chia Gozim said, sometimes things are going on and it can be you. Like I always tell her that one of the things I like about talking back is when Talker says, don't tell me it cannot be you. It can be you today at 6 p.m. So it actually can be you. The friend of hers who bite somebody and went to jail could actually be, God forbid, us if we don't manage our emotions. If you're always backing and people don't have access to talk to you about it. And like I said, remember the movie Monica, where she kept telling her mom, but the mom didn't want to lose her customer. And so this is time for change. Next slide, please. And in honor to my masters, we're doing a bit of references. And lastly, thank you very much for your time. So that is the Equest family. Must have been like my 7th birthday. So yeah. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Any questions?
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you so much. I have somebody here with me. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that. I thought by now we'll be sending like thank you. I was going to say, are we not going to clap? Aren't we sending like virtual appreciations? Come on, people. We're people that are grateful and appreciative. Thank you. Oh yeah, absolutely. Keep those hearts pumping and coming. Thank you so much. As you were talking, something that stood out to me, I said, when when I hear people say things like, oh, I was suspecting my domestic worker, so I followed her to the market. I'm like, Maduga and Richard, is that what I'll be doing in this life? Give me. Thank you for that. Is that what, like, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I'm not wired like that. I honestly do not even have the time. So let me not say it cannot be me. Maybe it can be me, but this me in this side of eternity does not have the time for all of that. But what I have seen for me is that everything that happens, I am aware of. I dream about it. Somebody tells me, it just comes to me. And that's my relationship with God. Somehow I know.
Checkers, you've gone off. You okay? Has anyone got any questions, maybe? Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm going to need 1 minute. Yes, please, let's take questions.
Questions or thoughts? Please, if you have, just unmute your mic.
I think
Just-
Okay,
Langret had
hello.
a question.
Hello, Ugona. Thank you so much. It was a very, very lovely session. And I learned a lot. It got me thinking about many things. And practically speaking, there's a case, I won't say with me, but or around me, where a teenager is alleging that her dad has started to touch her inappropriately. Now, she's not, I don't know this directly. I've heard this because apparently she's told her mom a couple of times, and the parents are in a very tumultuous marriage. The mom is in denial that the marriage is tumultuous. She's trying to make it work by all means. So I think for her, it's easier to bury her head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. But this child has gone ahead to go to her school. So I am now hearing it from the school. So practically speaking, as a bystander, what I'm torn because I feel like this is a case of let's just call nap tip and go and pick this man up. And there are a lot of implications. So apparently at a time she had gone to stay with her grandma because of this, though they didn't tell people that was the reason why. And obviously for a girl who a lot has gone on in her life, she started to relate with boys, and I think the grandma couldn't handle it. Obviously, she didn't have the exposure or know how to handle it and sent her back home. So there's the thing of when you escalate it, where will she go? Because her mom is still in the situation, her mom is still in the house. The mom is saying if she's leaving, she doesn't want to take the child. For all we know, the dad's brothers are all cut from the same cloth. Him and all his brothers are cut from the same cloth. So, as a bystander, really, and as a youth minister, because I know you've been one and you've spoken about it, practically speaking, when you have cases like that, what do you do?
My heart breaks. Thank you. How do Nigerians say thank you for that question? I'm Blankret. Good to see you. It's been a while. We need safe houses in Nigeria, and I think maybe I'll just get in touch with you through Chi, and we'll find there are people that work in that space. But we need safe houses in Nigeria where a child like that can go. I know that personally, some people. Oof, sorry, I'm just trying to take that in. Some people adopt the child eventually. But see, this is why we as Christians need to be open to adoption. Whether adoption or foster child, foster care, those sorts of things. I know in church we typically sort of escalate it to the church, to the comment ça s'appelle? to the church authorities. And I don't know if this is, and Pastor Sarah always says, Sarah Marco should say, if you are in a home and you know your husband is doing this and you're protecting the child because you want to protect your marriage, she said that is not a marriage. So I think that, so what I could do is, I used to have some contact when I was in the gender space back in Nigeria. I used to have some contacts around this. If we can get in touch, and I would try and find out, follow up, and see who is still there and what can be done about it. So if we can talk offline, that will work. But that is completely heartbreaking. That's completely heartbreaking. Yeah, I don't even know what to say, because those sort of things are not even my reality. Like, I talked about the kind of father I have, so I cannot even imagine. My heart breaks. But let's take it offline, so we can. Yes, NAPTIP is good to speak to, but there also needs to be a place where she goes to stay and for safety. And I didn't want to speak about all the beating that some parents do, and I hope none of them is here, where you leave marks. I remember talking to a child in my class, and the people she lived with in church were leaving marks on her back. It's just, yeah. Okay, so there's another question. What recommendations can you give to get our teenagers to talk to us? I think that it's not a magic one pill. One of the things I noticed, I lived in Morocco briefly. One of the things I noticed, and they say it's part of the Islamic sort of religion, but I heard about it first in Morocco, where they say that you give your mother, it's something like you treat your mother by 4 times the honor you give your father, something funny like that. They have something. So I just found it very interesting that a lot of the girls were always with their mom. They're holding hands, they're walking down the road, they're smiling. Like, it was just, it was like a new thing to me. I was just like, oh my goodness. They're laughing, they were always together, and you could tell that they were friends. Sometimes we have teenagers who come to church and they're like 17 and above, which are the people I was dealing with for a bit. And they'll come and say, Auntie, we do everything right. Our parents don't want to talk to us. We do everything right. I'm an A grade student. My parents just cannot see anything wrong. And sometimes it also is based on the relationship between the parents. Like you say, I'm not surprised when Plunkett said, oh, the marriage is not working. It's always, Satan always looks for leg. So it's always mostly based on that. I think also it's relationship you build with children. There's someone who I call my older sister. There's nothing her children do not tell her. And even when they hide it, she'll be lying down and God will tell her, stand up, go to your daughter's bag, check for this. There is nothing that those children, they just know that when they come home, they are safe. When I was younger, I used to say that I have this people who are like older siblings to me. And I used to say that if I ever got pregnant out of wedlock, I know where in the world to go. That sort of safety. How do you create the environment where a child feels safe? Safe is the word in safe, is the action word in safeguarding. How do you make a child feel safe enough to talk to you? How do you make them open up to you? How do you make them speak? For example, I'm like a teenager magnet. Anywhere I go, wherever it is in the world, I strike up a conversation with them. They're willing to talk about everything, So the other thing I wanted to mention, and thank you for reminding me with your comment, and it's a party. It's a party. Your name always just, yeah. One of the things is I would hope that you have friends that your children feel safe enough to speak to. I was on the phone with somebody here's daughter for like an hour 2 days ago. We're just gisting. And, sometimes I take her out. I would hope that you would be able to have those friends that your children feel safe enough to speak to. I'm very close to my parents' mates. So I go home, and I would hope that, even if they can't build that relationship with you, they should build it with their friends and safe spaces that they can speak to. I don't know if that helped.
Can I just add something? Thank you so much, sis, for everything you've said. The thought I left hanging was I just wanted to talk about the power of prayer. Sorry, I have a baby who thinks I need to oil my lips. So, the power of prayer, you, even as a mom or as an employer, you need to be very prayerful. That thing you said about people not lasting long, like the Holy Spirit, I've had a lot of employees I know would not last. Like the Holy Spirit eventually just shows me stuff. And like you said, it takes a while. I had one that the lady came, looked like an angel. That night she came, I had a dream that she became very combative, walked into my room, did not knock. It had happened exactly like that. It was just a different room. Exactly like that. So that thing you said about trusting your intuition, praying, listening to your sixth sense. Please, I just wanted to emphasize it. And to Zibate's question, I wanted to just say that I was one of those teenagers that had a safe space and didn't know how to take advantage of it. So in other words, you can do everything possible to create a safe space for your kids, and they just don't know how to open up. Like it's just that in between phase of trying to figure out life. Now I'm thinking about it, like my adult self is asking my younger self, what were you thinking? My mom had all the conversations. My mom was like our perfect safe space. But I went through certain things at a certain time in my life when I was, maybe there was also the denial that those things were happening. I was also confused. I'm just saying that it might not even be your fault as a mother that they're not talking. So I liked also that you said where you said, pray for them. Pray that they're having good company to keep them company in that season, that you have people just pray that they are properly connected wherever it is they're finding safety, but they will come out of it. I remembered so many things that happened, and then years after, I'll tell my mom, "Oh, do you know this?" She's like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I said, now that you're asking, I really don't know. But in those seasons, I bear witness that her prayers were with me. Something kept me safe and sane, and I don't know. I'll just say that when you've done all that you can, re, 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 go and as in just rely heavily on prayers is what I would say. Do we have any more
Can I
questions?
just make two comments
Yes,
out of
please.
it? The other
Yes.
thing I noticed that I'm the auntie that gives free hugs, so they know that in the youth church. So the first time, the boys, and I'm careful because they're boys, so they come and then they'll hug, and you see them very uncomfortable. Okay, Chineke has a question, so you see them very uncomfortable. They'll hug the first time, and they're like, "Ah, who is this auntie?" But when they see everybody else hugging me, that child now becomes the child that runs to me, right? So I give free hugs. I give hugs for free. And then we have rules in the youth church. Not that everybody kept them, but yeah, we try to keep them. But what do I know? We have rules in the youth church where the ladies council, the ladies, the guys council. It's part of the safeguarding things. In my church in France, you don't just hire just anybody in the children's church. They do police checks, security one thing. It's us in Nigeria that we just say, yeah, you come and work in the Jewish church. We don't really get social what's it called? Safeguarding. Yes, Chineye. Chineye, you have the floor. You're muted. Can you hear
Hi,
us?
Good evening, everyone. This has been an amazing time. I'm glad I jumped on the Zoom call. Just to add, not a question, but I used to teach Sunday school before I went to law school years ago. It was quite traumatic for me because of my personality, but I love kids, right? And so many things they would tell me. I would go tell my mom, and I'm like, what do we do? Now, my church was a typical Anglican church. So imagine having to tell someone who's in a certain position in the church that this was going on in his home or to his child, things like that. So fast track to where we are now. I think that it's important for parents, right, to have a safe place for their kids. Who's that friend of yours? Who's that cousin of yours that your daughter or your son can run to? Because, like you said, it's not everything your children will tell you. But there's some auntie that they are comfortable enough to go and confide in. Do you have those kind of people in your life? I think it's important as women and as parents to have those kind of people. Our mothers had them. I had my mother's friends who I could go and talk to. My mom is late now, but her chief bridesmaid is still alive. She checks on me, sends me messages. I have people like that in my life. And so I always tell people, my friends who are married, who can your kids come to? I'm grateful that I'm that kind of auntie for most of my friends' kids, for my nephews and little cousins. But I find a lot of women don't understand they need to have friends that their children can go to. So it starts from the beginning. What kind of person are you? I think Chinwe talked about values. Even as human beings, your values, your friends, your circle, those are the people your kids are going to continue connecting with. And at some point, if all of you are married at the same time and have kids about the same age, your friends will be kids. Your kids will be friends with each other. So I think it's important building relationships to have kind of friendships or relationships that our children can be safe. If my daughter cannot talk to me, can she talk to Auntie Gunna? Those are the kind of things that, as mothers, I think it's important that we start talking about and looking at. Just my small contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Chineye. Also, just to note, about two men on this call, and that is a little sad. So I don't know. I know they always leave it as the women's department, but the men need to also show up because you can't be sitting down there. Your wife is treating a girl, somebody else's child badly, and you're looking away. Okay, so all these people that you hear, oh, the woman was using knife on the child, putting pepper in the girl's private part. Where was the husband? Because he saw signs. So we can't just keep saying, oh, it's the women's department and you're looking away. Also, the men have to show up to protect their sons as well. So teach them consent, teach them, respect for themselves, teach them what abuse is. Yeah, so I think it's important to also sort of bring the men into this conversation, or like this, the East Africans say, the conversation. So the conversation. So it's important to bring men into this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been such an amazing time. Even for me, like the statistics were jarring and troubling. I'm happy that we're having these difficult conversations. I also just want to say that what the conversation we're having is for you to start to think about how to protect your children from praise within and without, and protect your domestic workers too from praise within and without. Three men, yes, three men, absolutely. And when I saw the men, I was really excited because, like Ugonna said, this has predominantly been a women's conversation, but we're calling for all hands to be on deck for the transformation in the domestic work sector that we desire to see. So I just wanted to make sure that we're focusing on the fact that we're protecting our children and we're protecting our words, and that we're having these conversations both ways. And I'm just really grateful for your time, for staying with us. I want to be mindful of our time. And I know that this will spark a lot of questions. Ms. Nkem will go ahead now and share the link to the Domestic Employers Circle, where we'll continue the conversations. If you have any question that comes up between now and I don't know, whenever, we're answering those questions. We have some questions that spilled over from next week. We will spend time answering them in the WhatsApp group. Please join and contribute. And I know that we're emphasizing a lot on speakers responding, but I also know that a lot of us here have a ton of experience, a ton of knowledge that we can also glean from. So please feel free to share. Please feel free to share. Ms. Nkem just put it in the comments, in the comment section. Please feel free to, click that link to join the Domestic Employers Circle. That's where the bulk of the impact will happen. Thank you so much, Ms. Ugonna, for your time and for sharing. It only gets better from here.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for my
Absolutely.
fans. You know yourselves. I don't mind. I can't.
All righty. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to call it a night. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your evening. Please share with somebody that needs to be part of this conversation next week, and we'll share the replay link during the course of the week in the Domestic Employer Circle. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, God bless you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Absolutely. People say bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.